like, how do you vet women for your men? Like, what do you look for specifics in terms of their lifestyle or their income or things like that?
When I meet them in person, certainly it's, do they show up on time? Or even when I'm Zooming with them, do they show up on time? Have they put effort into their appearance when they're meeting me? Some women have shown up on Zoom with a filter on their camera. And I'm like, honey, we can't use a filter. I got to see what you look like. And so I've got to get a feel for people's personalities. You know, can they laugh? Can they laugh at themselves? Or, and I'm constantly testing everybody in some ways, you know?
This is Relatable, Relationships Unfiltered. Hey, welcome to Relatable, Relationships Unfiltered. Today I'm hanging out with Gina Hendrix, matchmaker and dating coach. She gives me some insights into what men are looking for, and she validates my opinion on who should pay that first date check. All right, Gina, so you're going to help me find a man here with your magical approach to this matchmaking thing.
Maybe? My magical matchmaking powers, maybe, I don't know.
I guess we're about to find out. Tell us what you do as a matchmaker. I have clients that ask me about that quite a bit, working a lot in relationships and people who struggle with the dating apps, or like so many of us are so busy, so we struggle meeting people organically. And so I have clients who ask, like, should I find a matchmaker? What does that look like to work with a matchmaker?
I guess it really depends. Yeah. I feel like I'm kind of a snob. I'll be honest. I'm a snob when it comes to matchmaking, because there's so many people that will literally are willing to work with anybody as long as their money's green, they'll take it, type of thing. And I think that really my secret sauce is just being very, very particular. But the other side of the coin is, I don't have like endless people on my roster. I have a lot of ladies in my database, but in terms of clients, it's men who hire me. So in terms of that, it's a small pool of guys, because if I don't think a guy's the right fit or women aren't going to like him, I won't work with him. So, and I don't advise matchmaking, like for women to hire matchmakers. I don't advise that. No.
Okay. Tell me about that.
Oh, well, because it's a hard thing to do in reverse, and matchmakers know that, but they get greedy about money. They don't want to turn anybody down, even if they know. And I have so many conversations with women on almost a daily basis of them paying matchmakers, $25,000, $30,000, and then they didn't help them at all. In this one woman's case, this was terrible. It's one of the worst situations I've heard of. In fact, I've even helped women get their money back from other matchmakers.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because it really upsets me. But this one woman, she's out of Texas. She was a divorced or widowed, I forget, but quite wealthy, and was paid this matchmaker $30,000, and the matchmaker, the person who was her matchmaker, and really, these people are like, was a barista at Starbucks, last month, and now it's a matchmaker type thing.
Sure.
And so her matchmaker is basically set her up on Match.com with a profile on Match.com, and was then acting as this woman on Match.com. Not even kidding. Can't make this stuff up, right? And so she would line up the men and on Match, and then say to this woman, well, now you are going to get on a call with these men that I've gotten lined up for you. And this poor woman, she was like an older woman, but not too old enough though. And she was like, I thought I hired you guys for like actual matchmaking, not setting me up on a dating site. And they said, well, no, that'd be another $30,000 if you wanted us to. I could not believe.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So anyway.
So yeah. There's a lot of scams out there, is what you're saying.
A lot of scams. I think, so my business is sort of divided into two these days. It's on the one side, it is men who hire me. It's only men who hire me as clients, because it is challenging for matchmakers to take on a woman who can pay a hefty fee, like most of us charge, including myself, and then go and get them the type of man they want. A lot of times they want a man at their level, around their age, who makes the same money. But those guys, a lot of times, might want younger, might want a different look. It's just a harder dynamic to do it in the reverse. Sure. And then you have to go to a total strange guy who's not your client and say, oh, you've got to now take my lady out on a date. And it's just a harder thing. It's a harder setup. So what I have now divided my business into two, and the other side of the business is I basically teach women how to be their own matchmaker. And I do it through my coaching programs, and I do group coaching and one-on-one coaching. And then I have an upcoming glow up event. So I have women flying in from all over in 2 weeks.
Oh, cool.
I'm giving them a whole makeover and profile, and I'm doing the whole thing. And it's going to be really fun. So I get to do those two things because I'm not going to lie. I love doing matchmaking at a very, very high level. Been doing it for 15 years. But sometimes it can be a little, I'm not going to lie here because I never do, soul sucking a little bit, because you hear a lot of things that men say about women, and men can be extremely particular, just like women can, but it can be a little, and then on the other hand, I can arm women with all this knowledge and intel I have from working with the type of men they want to meet. So it's a balance. It's a balance I'm doing these days.
What are some things that you look for when you take a man on as a client? So when you're saying that you're particular about that, what are some of those expectations you look for?
It's a really good question. I need to make sure that he is authentically ready for a real relationship, and he's not just looking to just date a bunch of women, because the women I find, they're counting on me to also pre-qualify him to be a man that's looking for a real relationship. I mean, a lot of the times, the gorgeous women that these guys want access to, they meet a lot of men, but a lot of the guys are playing around. And so if I can say my guy's looking for a real relationship and I can vouch for him as a person, I have to genuinely like him and be able to vouch for him. That's what I'm looking for. And, most of the time, most of my matchmaking business has actually been through, most of my guys have come through referrals. And I do like it when they come through referrals, because then I have a bit of backstory on them. But men who sort of show up without the backstory or a referral, sometimes it just feels like they're not really ready for a serious relationship. It does feel like they're playing around, because when it gets to the part where I'm meeting with them, and if they're not in LA, we get on a Zoom, they're in their car driving, and that's not a real meeting. That tells me right away they're not serious. They're not taking me seriously, or they're surprised about the fee. And it's like, how did they not do their research? How did they not know what's happening here? You know what I mean?
Right.
So I'm very careful, because if I'm not interested in working with a guy who's just not serious about the process, or if I don't think women are going to like him, if I think he's like shooting out of his league. One man, for example, wanted me to kind of lie about his age for him by like 10 years, which is substantial and makes me very uncomfortable, because women are going to figure it out, and then they're going to come to me and say, well, why didn't you know better? I mean, I can't play dumb about it, because then I just look dumb. So it's, just things like these, things like this.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would imagine even like talking about somebody taking that meeting from their car and things like that, that would be an indication of not only how serious or not serious they're taking you, but then probably how serious or not serious they're going to take a relationship. Absolutely. But also some of that is just like so arrogant. And so then to set somebody up with that. Yeah.
Right. No, I totally agree. And, and it's like, they have no, I take people serious, and then I tell them, though, I'm not, I'm nice, but I'm not that nice, because they're used to talking to matchmakers who will kiss their ass basically because they just want the dollars, and not me. I'll tell them straight up, like, you don't seem like you're serious about this. I read them the riot act.
What is the process of like intaking somebody into as a client?
So you mean, and we're talking about men, right?
Talking about men. Yeah. So when they become a client, they reach out, you set up that meeting. What does that process look like?
So initially I put, and again, I think they're not used to, they think they're interviewing me, but I'm really interviewing them. Right. So initially I have like a brief intake form on my website that they do. It tells me a little bit about them, enough so that I know, because right out of the gate, to be honest, if a man doesn't make enough money, he's not going to be the right client for me, because my fee is substantial, and I'm not interested in somebody scraping together their nickels to work with me. I don't want to do that. Right. So if he's, if he's not looking for a real relationship, if he's doesn't make enough money, quite frankly, but then I get on a call with him, And then I dig deeper and I find out more about what he's looking for. This is where I'm trying to really get a feel for him and his lifestyle. Because even if he's wealthy, and I've turned down a billionaire out of Texas, I'll just say, and he seemed nice enough, but he didn't want a relationship. He wanted to get women on his plane and travel around and party, and my ladies don't like that. So I get a feel for them on the initial call, and then I will do a follow-up Zoom with them where together we review possible matches who I'm just sort of guessing out of the gate at that point because I haven't seen him yet. I really need to see him, but I make it very clear to the guys that it's almost a litmus test in a way, because if they're not attracted to like the ladies in my database, then I know this might not be the right match, based on their feedback. But sometimes they think they're ordering off like, a hamburger menu. They think the women I'm showing them are the women and I'm like, these women are free to say yes or no. They may or may not like you. You know what I mean? And so, so I put them through those paces. And usually it's probably takes a couple of weeks, sometimes a little more of back and forth talking and me asking more questions and getting to know them a bit before I really decide that this is going to work.
And then once you guys start working together, is it like X number of dates that they get set up on, or like how does that process go?
Yeah, it's a great question too. Because I don't really get these questions specifically about my business, so I like it. Thank you. But I've done big deals where I sign them and it's just unlimited introductions. And then we're both in it together for all these introductions, but it's usually a year contract. And then it's interesting. This is something interesting. If anybody ever wants to be a matchmaker, don't make this mistake. I made it for a very long time. Like men in the beginning of my business, because they wanted to pay half the fee, would say, well, what about a 6-month deal? And I would sometimes say, okay, well, sure, because I needed the money. But here's the deal. 6 months, you're doing double the work, because instead of giving you a year to do what you need to do, now you've got to work twice as hard. So now if somebody says, oh, what about 6 months? I say, sure, but that's double the fee because I got to work twice as fast, you see?
Yeah.
Because it's unrealistic to think you're going to find. That's why I like when some matchmaking companies, they'll make these 3-month deals with people. And it's so unrealistic for them to actually, and they know they can't do it in 3 months. I mean, that's next to impossible. People don't even really reveal themselves, I would say, until about 5 or 6 dates in, maybe 4 or 5, it depends. But so the way I like to do it now, and it's really because I really want to get to know them and see if I want to continue working with them. So usually what I'll do now is I'll do a set number of introductions, and I don't even set it in a particular time frame. I'll say like, okay, it'll be $25,000 for 8 introductions, let's say. And I do that for me as well as them, because I know I can deliver, but I can't guarantee until I start working with somebody if the women are going to like them or if I'm going to end up really liking them like I was hoping. So at the end of 8 introductions, usually either I don't want to work with them again, or I've set them up and found them somebody, or they will just renew and do 8 more introductions. And then we just go like that. You know what I mean? And I feel like from doing this 15 years, that is a way better structure because it builds trust on both ends.
So do they keep working with you like while they're dating? So if they're like multiple dates in, do they like, are you still coaching them or?
So if I set somebody up, I usually like things to be very clean and clear. So occasionally I'll set somebody up and they're like, I like her, Gina, but I'm not sure yet. Can I go out with somebody else? And so I will, in that case, set them up with somebody else. But I don't let any of that linger that long. I don't like limbo. I don't want her to be hanging or, because a lot of times if women are smart, they'll keep in touch with me and they'll keep me in the loop. So they'll come back and they'll say, Gina, has you asked to be set up anymore? And that's a smart question to ask me. And I'm not going to lie. And so I'll tell my guys, hey, listen, she's going to ask and I'm going to be honest with her. So if you're not interested, because I find men either know or they don't know. That's really the truth. Women, we can become more attracted to somebody. We can but men, Not really. They're either into a woman or they're not. And so there's really no point in letting her linger. It's like that's what people do when they're in the dating app world, when there's nobody sort of overseeing the chaos,
Yeah.
But when I'm in the mix, I really try to keep everybody honest and their intentions clear. And so I don't like the murky waters. I don't like that.
Yeah, I could certainly use a babysitter when it comes to dating because mine is rather chaotic as well
Right.
in that dating app world for sure. When you put women on your database, as you're saying, how do they find you online or how do they find you and what's that process?
Sure. So most of the women these days actually are coming through TikTok because I've gotten a little popular on TikTok in the last few years. And so most of the women, like the women who are flying in for my glow up and all my stuff, it's mostly all TikTok ladies these days. But the way we do it, because of TikTok, I've had to kind of reformat the structure. So when a man comes to me, I've amassed a huge, great database, right? But women go on and off the market. And so just because they're in my database doesn't mean they're actually single right now. I don't know. They could have met somebody yesterday or a month ago. I don't keep in touch with everybody
Right.
on the regular, there's too many women to keep up with. But so when a man comes to me, I find out exactly what he's looking for. And then I start a new search for him. And I have scouts that are constantly on the lookout. So they're constantly scouting for exactly what that guy is looking for. But I initially go to my database is the very first go-to. So I'll start setting him up with women in the database that I think could be a match for him while we're strategically scouting women for him in addition.
Okay.
But so the three ways is we either have scouted a woman and given her a code to fill out a profile because I know that I feel strongly that I have a match for her, or women, if they don't know me at all and they've not been personally scouted, then they can fill out a premium profile on my database, which there is a fee for that because I end up getting on a Zoom with them because I find, honestly, most people, their profile photos are so shitty. Like you can't even send them. I can't even send them out. Just the other day, I'm in the process of signing this new man. He's a Christian man in the South. And I was like, oh, okay, let me see who I have for him. And I was like, oh, she'd be good. And I go to look at their profiles and I'm like, they didn't do good photos. And I might have even done a Zoom with them and told them to update their photos and they still didn't. And they're in the shadows and they're not, because I know if I send that profile, they're going to get a no, even though I might think they're great.
Yeah.
If a guy sees those unflattering photos or even one unflattering photo, it's going to be a no. So this way, when they do a premium profile, I'm on a Zoom with them. I walk them through whether I think their photos are good enough. Usually they're not. And then I give them an assignment to redo their photos. I even show them examples of good photos. I'm like literally holding their hand to ensure they actually have a profile that I can send out, because it doesn't do anybody any good to fill out a free profile for me if it's a hideous profile that I can't send. What makes a shitty or hideous profile photo would be, oh my God. Well, let's just talk about the woman's profile that I saw the other day where I was just like, what are you doing? 3 of the photos were from her back, like from behind. Okay. And I know people want to go, oh, that nobody to do that. Are you kidding? I see so many things like this. Or like she's really, really, really tiny and like the scenery's great. There's no man that's going to say, God, I've got to date her because the scenery is so great. They don't care about the scenery. All right. They don't want to see you small in the shadows with a great scenery. And she's just giving me a lot of that. Or like there was like the glare in her eye, like the reflection, and the picture looked weird, or just, I mean, I've seen it all. And the thing is, also one big thing is when the photos don't all match up. So if you look a little younger here, a little older here, a little thinner there, a little heavier, and your photos are sort of all over the place, that's also not going to be good.
Yeah.
I mean, the ideal thing for me, I only need 3 great photos to show my guys. Need to see a great straight on, great light like this, straight on, happy, smiling, or I've coached girls and given them all these tips, and then they come back, Gina, what about these new photos? And they're like like resting bitch face. And I can't, like, I mean, literally they look so miserable and they're trying to get a date with, like, it's like, no, you've got to be not too sexy though. I've seen some of that too, and that's not good. But you've got to be playful, sexy, sophisticated, but the lighting's got to be really good. You've got to be happy, clear. It's just straightforward photos with great lighting, and got to see your body clearly.
Yeah.
And you got to see your face and your personality, just that.
Do you, are there other, like, how do you vet women for your men? Like, what do you look for specifics in terms of their lifestyle or their income or things like that?
Yeah, listen, I'm constantly testing everybody in some ways, some ways might be a little unconscious on my part, but some are intentional. So, when I meet them in person, certainly it's, do they show up on time? Or even when I'm Zooming with them, do they show up on time? Have they put effort into their appearance when they're meeting me? Some women have shown up on Zoom with a filter on their camera. And I'm like, honey, we can't use a filter. I've got to see what you look like. And so I've got to get a feel for people's personalities. Can they laugh? Can they laugh at themselves? And I know some people they end up telling me, I was so nervous to meet you, Gina. But I'm really good at kind of reading between the lines. Are they really vague when I try to ask them questions? Are they just, I try to be able to connect the dots with people. So if they can't explain their lifestyle, if they can't, if just something feels off to me, I'm looking for these things,
Yeah. So you meet with all of the women then that like you have one-on-one
meetings.
I do. What are some things that men are looking for? So like if you're asking these questions, you're trying to get to understand the woman, their lifestyle, all of those things. Right. What are some things that men look for?
It varies from guy to guy, right? But I mean, I think, and people don't really think this through. So like if I'm talking to a woman who, says to me, well, I can, and I'm like, oh yeah, I don't really have any, guys in Minnesota for you to date, and she'll be like, oh, well, I can travel. Well, that's fine. I said, oh, really? Because you have a young child. What's your like custody arrangement? And she's like, oh, well, he has him, every other week or whatever. I'm like, okay, that's great. But then could you relocate? Because I don't think my guys are going to relocate. So women a lot of times aren't really thinking that through. So my guys, a lot of times depending on where they are in life, right? So my younger guys, and I've had clients, my guys have been, you're moving around with that dot.
Trying to get that light off my face.
That's hilarious. So should I do it too? Just
yeah, look like we're dancing together.
So some of my guys, if they're younger, the important things they're looking for is somebody who is educated, has a great career, and they're really looking for a lot of things in common because, I feel like any man, what I've learned is when they're looking for a long-term partner, when they're really serious, they really do care about all those details. Where most women are like, oh, most guys don't care about my education. Most guys don't. I'm like, that's because you haven't met a guy who probably didn't have a great education. He probably didn't have a great career. So he didn't care about yours. But when a man is very educated and when he's serious about a partner, then the details about what she brings to the table kind of matters. But then I find those who have been divorced are in a different part of their life. So they still want a woman who's smart, but their focus becomes more on really lifestyle in terms of, is she flexible to travel? Because he's at a place his kids are probably grown and gone. So now his partner, he wants somebody who can golf with him. He wants somebody who can go on the trips and travel like he does. So it becomes more of a lifestyle match at that point. Whereas I feel like the younger guys, what they're looking for is somebody who's can be a great mom and who's educated, but who also is like they're equal in a lot of ways. Do you know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah. So that makes sense. Like depending on where they are at the stage of their lives is going to shift what they're looking for. So you work with men and women though all over the country. That's not specific to your area.
No, all over the country. I mean, I've had clients all over the United States and different parts of Europe and Paris and Dubai and London and Morocco and I'm talking to one man in India right now. I'm not certain. He's very sweet, but I'm not certain yet about him. He wants. So here's what's interesting. He likes. He said curvy, but he didn't mean curvy because I like to see visuals. He likes very, very plus size ladies. Like, and he's like 5'10", and he says even a lady like 6 feet tall, plus size, like, and I have to admit, every guy shows up with a unique request. I have not gotten that request before. You know what I mean? And he's in India, and he doesn't want to meet women in India. He wants to meet Western women. So
how is that going to work?
I know. See, most matchmakers, all they care about is his money. But I worry about all of this stuff. So I told him, I said, well, you've got to get more pictures. He went out right away and got pictures. Like the next day, he's like, yes, ma'am. How can we proceed? And I'm like, oh, I don't know yet. I'm not sure. I told him just today, I said, I'm still doing my research. I'm going to get back to you. So I don't know. I think what I'm going to end up telling him is that I'm going to ask for, and this is not what any matchmaker would ever do, but this is what I would do. Because I feel like if anybody could help him, it's me.
Sure.
And I feel like I'm going to ask him for a deposit, some sort of, deposit. And that'll at least get me started doing this search for him, because it is going to be a new search. And I want him to come to LA and meet me. And if he's willing to do all those things, because he's going to have to be coming. So, because I'll never have any woman fly out of the country to meet him. I would never do that. Even my guys who are in different states dating women, they fly to meet the women. We don't fly the women here. I'm not comfortable with that. I want the women to feel as comfortable as possible, So he would have to be going to wherever these ladies are, which is going to be in America, because he wants to meet them in America. So I need him to understand what he's in for before I can fully commit to him.
Is he willing to relocate? Does that sound like
he says he's open to he says he has some family in New York and other places. And I don't know. I don't know.
Very interesting.
Interesting. Yes,
I mean, that's quite the trek for 8 first dates, right? That's like,
I know. So, well, heck, it's going to be quite the trek for just coming to meet me, and maybe I'm going to give him 2 dates while he's here. You know what I mean? I think, and so, but if he's willing to do that, then I might commit to him, but I want the women to give me feedback. I don't know, man. It's a big response. I take this business so seriously, probably too seriously, but I'd probably be a lot wealthier if I did. But if I did the way most matchmakers did. But I take my business very seriously because I care deeply about people, and I want to do right by people. That's just the bottom line, Some women who's in the database, they're like, Gina, why don't you have a match for me? Well, a lot of times I'm looking out for them. I mean, listen, I could probably set them up if I was willing to lower my standards on my guys and have a lot more guys on my roster, but not willing to do that.
Do you have a cap on the number of women you have in your database?
No, there's no cap.
Okay.
The ladies are endless supply, because again, they go on and off the market. And it's also like you almost have to have a little something for everybody, different ages, I mean, there's just so many variables involved. This business is so hard that you really kind of have to have. And even if you have like the perfect match, I could call her tomorrow and she might not have heard from me in 6 months, and she might already be in a relationship. I mean, so you really have to have basically a lot of inventory, for lack of a better word,
And what are some of the tips that you give it, or like when you do the coaching for women and, all of, when you're working directly with them, what's that?
All that jazz?
Yes. What are some tips that you give them for finding a successful man, or like showing up as their best selves with a successful man? Like, what is different with dating somebody in that league?
Well, I have this whole thing that I call the A game. And, men are very familiar with the concept of the A game, but women aren't. But I've learned from working with these guys, billionaires and celebrities, that, the only way to succeed is to bring your A game, right? And it means they're always on time. They're planners. They really have their act together. So certainly a woman can't be a slacker in any way. If she wants to date a high level man, she literally has to be bringing her A game as well. She can't be, a few minutes late and think that's cute. And some women think it's like they've gone to the Willy Wonka, place, and they're going to try to gather up all the gold coins and tell him about their money troubles or their struggles. It's like, you cannot be doing that stuff, And I also say, really, if you really want to take it up a notch, because I think a lot of these men, they're used to women wanting gifts. They're used to giving gifts so early into the relationship. I tell the women, because I do think sometimes it's an unconscious test on the man's part, to see if a woman can be bought, to see if she can be won over with gifts early on. And he'll do that, I think, sometimes in lieu of putting the real work in, because like shiny object over here, instead of really doing the work to get to know somebody, it's just sort of a cheat to get to the front of the line with her. But I think that if a woman can resist the gifts and tell him, no, thank you so much, I appreciate it, but I'd rather just get to know you before you start buying me anything. But most women would never say that. I mean, because they want those Louis Vuittons and the Louis Vuitton purse and all the gifts and all the stuff. But if they could resist that, that would really separate them from most of the women these guys meet.
Okay.
He'll be thrown for a loop if she did that. He'd be like, "What? I'm sorry, what?" And it will really. He might not like it initially because he's just not used to hearing it. They're not used to hearing a lot of things. But if she did that, it's better for the long term, for sure, because he will like it. He will appreciate it.
Are there certain like traits that you see with the successful men in terms of whether it be arrogance or they're self-absorbed, or is there any type of those, or is that what you're weeding out when you're having these initial conversations?
Correct. I try to weed that out ahead of time. I mean, listen, there's been men who got past me and I didn't know.
Sure.
And then I'm like, oh, what did I get myself into? But for the most part, I am on the lookout for that. So men who, listen, I've had a guy who called me up, and this was a few months ago, and he's like, Gina, okay, I talk, you listen. He says, you talk. He says, I talk, you listen. I just want models. You got models? Just send me some models. And it was just like, oh, and I ended up calling him, and I was just like, yeah, I don't think this is going to be the right fit.
Yeah.
So there are those men who, I also think I'm a little leery of those men who don't necessarily, who they're successful and smart, very educated, and all this stuff, but they don't care how smart, or they don't care how educated or worldly or sophisticated their partner is. To me, that's a bit of a red flag, because I think it's a control thing. You know what I mean?
Oh,
I think it's a control thing. He'll feel like he's going to feel like he has the upper hand. He can outsmart her.
Sure. Oh yeah, that's smart. So that's something even to be aware of when people are dating. If somebody is not, what about like the age difference? Do you put any like boundaries around how many years separate them when you're doing the matchmaking?
Yeah, I mean, certainly, my God, if somebody was 60 and they came along and wanted to date, women in their 30s even, I mean, that's a stretch. But some men will come along, and they'll say they want to have a second family, and they actually mean that, because they have. But I'm more comfortable. And so I think really the answer to that question becomes it's not necessarily about the age gap. It's about, how do I put this? It's about how much life has that person lived. So, like, in other words, like a woman in her 40s, she's seasoned, she's smart, she's sophisticated, she's probably been through a marriage or not, but she's been around at that point. So then I wouldn't be as worried about her, and I wouldn't be as worried about setting her up with like so super, super wealthy men, even in their like 80s, they would date a woman. It's probably going to be 20 years. It's probably going to be 20 years younger, right?
Okay.
So she would be in her 60s, but she would be like a Halle Berry in her, or I don't think Halle Berry's in her 50s. It would be like a Michelle Pfeiffer who's ridiculously hot in her 60s. You know what I mean? Like it, but so it kind of becomes like that. So if he's in his 60s, probably the cutoff might be in the 40s, maybe. But although I had a movie star guy and he was amazing and sexy and fabulous, he was in his 60s and he didn't care. He would date women in their 60s as long as she was fit and everything. So there's exceptions, but I'm never gonna, like, I would be uncomfortable setting a man up in his 50s, even with a woman in the early 30s like that. I would skew him to like mid to later 30s if he's looking to have kids. But these men, especially the men on dating apps where they're much older and they will say that they're open to kids, well, that's because they want to date younger women. You know what I mean?
Sure. Right. Yes, and I think that, so for me, I date older men, and so that's what I prefer, but not like 20 years, but maybe like 10, 12
How old
years.
are you? How old are you?
38.
Okay. You're 38 and you want to have kids?
I have a 16-year-old son.
Oh, you do? You started young.
I started young.
So
So
then would you have more kids?
no, absolutely not.
Oh, okay.
I think that's why I like the older men, because my hopes are that they also don't want.
That puts you in a different bracket because you're kind of at an advantage, actually, in a lot of ways, to be still young and have a kid that's pretty much grown and you don't want another one. I mean, that's very unusual.
Oh,
Very.
so you're telling me I'm prime for the database, huh? That's what
Yeah.
I'm hearing.
Well, yeah, you're primed for the database, and I think you're primed for those men that do want to date younger but don't want to have any more kids.
Yes, which
But-
is,
But you're saying you only date 10 years older. I don't really even call that older. Like when you tell me, Gina, I want to date older, I'm thinking in the 50s.
I'm not opposed to early 50s.
Okay.
Yeah, that's not, and I think it's also because that lifestyle, though I do work a lot, and that is one of my barriers to dating for sure. I own businesses and I'm just busy. And so, but I have the ability, the flexibility, and the means to travel. And so like that, I probably enjoy somebody who is closer in that age, because that they're not raising kids. Yeah, they don't have their own young kids. And they also want to travel. And so I think that's also the draw for me.
And where do you live?
In Arizona.
What, Scottsdale?
The Phoenix area.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so have you been in Matchmaker's databases before? You probably are.
I'm not. No. There was one matchmaker that's out here that was probably a couple years ago, right after my divorce. And we had a meeting set up, and I then, whatever ended up happening at that time, did not go to that meeting. Okay. So I let her know that, I wasn't going to come. And then since then, I haven't pursued it any further, which probably would be in my best interest, because the dating apps, I like what you're talking about in terms of the intentionality. So with the dating apps, as you probably know, with women that you have on there, like you can end up with thousands of likes within a couple days, right? And so then when you're looking at that, that's so overwhelming, and it is so messy, and it's so chaotic. So like you were saying earlier, there's no containment around it. No. So often what I end up doing is just not opening the app, because that's too overwhelmed.
Well, first of all, you have to know that likes, because I love to talk about the dating apps. I had my own dating app for a while. Likes mean nothing. Even matches, swipes mean nothing. Women will go, oh, this picture gets so many likes, and yet it's from behind. Again, like it's like, right. That doesn't count. He's not talking about you. It's whatever, maybe your butt. But or they'll say, I get so many matches, and I'm like, matches mean nothing. You know, the only thing that matters on the dating apps, are they willing to put in effort? And if you're on Bumble, it means when you match with them, they need to extend the time, or you don't even talk to them at all.
Interesting. Yes. That's an interesting approach. Okay.
What I call separating the men from the boys, because believe me, if a man is truly interested and he's legit, because men are swiping on every woman a lot of times. They're like, meh, 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 you know, but when you match, that's when they go, oh, hang on, let me read her profile. And they read through, and either they're really excited about you, or they're just like, I'll let this go away, you know? And if they're excited about you, they're going to extend the time. And I
agree.
And you can test it, and I'll be right about that. Also, when you match, you should be matching with intention. So men that put down their career, men that probably, if you're successful, you should focus only on those that have, an advanced education, a graduate degree or a master's degree. For you, you definitely only wanted none of those guys that put their open to kids, because now I know what's confusing for women is that sometimes open to kids, people think of it in different ways. So if he may go, because you need to ask them, right? That's one thing you've got to ask them. So you put open to kids. Does it mean you want kids, and they'll be like, oh no, I'm open if somebody has kids. Okay, but you don't want kids? You got to repeat these things to them. You know what I mean? You really have to know how to pre-qualify. And then if you're on Hinge, none of this liking business, okay? None of the hearts or roses. If a man cannot string 3 sentences together for you, you do not need to talk to him at all. You know what I mean?
Agreed. But to get through all that initial of like looking at their education and looking
Right.
if they have
Yeah.
kids, like that is so much work. And and it is so overwhelming. And then also like, so they're attractive, certain height, certain educate, like, so then that's where also my friends give me a hard time because my list is so long, but
Right.
I feel like I deserve to have a long list. So I'm not willing to shorten it.
But I would say, what's more important is even because like when I do these swipe sessions with ladies, in our coaching, we're doing these, I call it man shopping or swipe sessions, but we're looking at guys and they're like, right away, they see the first horrible photo and they're just like, I go, hang on, I haven't even read the details yet. Because sometimes good guys pick the worst photos of themselves, and I'll remind the ladies, do you remember how awful your profile was before I fixed it for you? These guys don't have me helping them. So, I say if his details look good in the beginning, like if he put an interesting career and his first picture is like, let's look further. Let's just read the details. Let's see. Maybe he didn't pick the best photo in the beginning. And maybe because sometimes these guys that are players, the smoothest guys, they know what pictures to put. You know what I mean? True. They know it. So I think really lean more on the details and less on the pictures. I'm not saying pick like hunchback or anything like that, but I would say put more emphasis on reading those details before you skip by them,
Okay, fair. That's my hairstylist. Whenever I'm there, she's standing behind me. She's like, okay, pull it up. Let's look. And I'm always like, oh my God. And she's like, no, stop, read it. Like scroll. Right. And I'm like, okay.
Exactly. I'm like, you're doing work. Fast. I want to look through, but everybody gets really like, and it depends on how you're feeling and what frame of mind you're in. If you've had a bad day and you're like, oh, these dating apps, then you're probably not going to like anybody, but if it's like you're beginning of the day and it's like you're fresh and new for the day, and so maybe that's the time to go on and just do some swiping, but don't speed through it. You got to really take a little time and really read these profiles a little more.
Fair. Okay. Valid point. Tell us real quick before we wrap up. So when we're talking about going on a first date, what are some first date tips that you give? We have both male and female listeners. So when, putting your best foot forward, putting your A game, what are some tips?
I mean, I think for the women, certainly, and the men, both, you definitely want to be on time. And nobody ever is going to count it against you if you're early. Never hurts to be early. You have to really be present with the person. People get so in their heads, like people will oftentimes ask me like, well, what questions do I ask? Well, I can't sit here and tell you what questions to ask because then you wouldn't be in that moment. You'd be in your head. Got to ask this question. So it's got to be just like this, a conversation of two people who genuinely want to get to know you or each other. So, ask things that you want to know and listen and be present in the moment. But you definitely have to make sure you are dressed for the restaurant, know where you're going, know that you've put effort into your appearance, because I think some people get so beaten down by dating. They're like, I probably won't like him. So then they don't put in, and then they do like him, and then they didn't put their best foot forward, and then they're not going to get a second date. So I also say no coffee dates. I hate coffee dates.
I do too. I hate that. When somebody says, do you want to go? I'm like, no. First of all, I'm like, you're cheap. So no. And second of all, like, that does not sound appealing to me at all. What do you say is a good first date?
I usually set people up for dinner. I mean, okay. I think dinner's a good go-to, although I would like, if I was just going to design it myself, because this is what I would like, is like an art opening is kind of fun. Because, you can walk around, you're not stuck. You can talk about the art. They usually have free drinks and snacks. If you're somebody who doesn't want to spend a lot of money, that's a way to do that. And I think, and there's usually always an art opening happening somewhere. I mean, unless you live in the middle of nowhere, but I'd say some kind of an art event. I think
that's a great idea.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so if you're somebody that doesn't want to spend a lot of money, that's a really good way to kind of look interesting without, breaking the budget, and also feeling like, oh, how am I going to sit through a whole dinner? Which I don't know why anybody who's not fully evolved and looking for a substantial person can't manage to get through a dinner with somebody. Even if you don't like somebody, you can use it as practice, conversation. I don't understand when people say, oh, I don't want to be stuck with somebody. To me, that just sounds terribly immature, terribly immature. You know what I mean?
Yes. And probably not good conversational skills.
Probably not, right? Probably not. And so when I've done some TikTok videos about coffee and how horrible that is, oh my God, you people just get furious at me when I tell them I don't like, and I love coffee, but just not as a date. Because if somebody likes coffee, here's what it tells me. It tells me they go on a lot of first dates and not many second dates.
Interesting.
Both men and women. So if a woman says, well, I don't want to waste my time, I blah, blah, blah. Yeah, that's because you've gone on a lot of first dates and now you just want to get through it quick. And a guy that really wants to go on coffee dates, he doesn't spend a lot of money because he goes on a lot of first dates. So it's very telling when somebody suggests coffee.
That's a good insight. Okay, my last question. When it comes to the check, what do you suggest formality-wise around who picks up the check?
Of course, the man should always pick up the check.
Thank you. Let's say it louder. Always.
Shouldn't even touch the bill. Shouldn't even, put, and if a guy goes, oh, you want to split it? I mean, then, you just basically have to know at that point. You could either, because he's asking you if you want to split it. So you could just say, well, no, I'd rather not. He asked you, or you split it. But then, you just know he's never going to get to see you again.
Yeah, that's never again.
I can't understand why a guy would do that. Now, I will tell you one little story real quick. A girl that's going through one of my coaching programs. This is very interesting. And she's an attorney and she's 30. She's sweet and smart. And, she was dating this guy and they'd gone on like 3 or 4 dates. And it was like maybe their 4th date. And at the end of that date, he said, so do you want to split it? And she was like, okay. She did. But now most of us would pull the plug and forget it. She didn't do that. She actually talked to him about it and said, you made me feel uncomfortable. This is not, I want traditional male female roles. And maybe if I'm in a relationship, it's different, but and they had a discussion around money and expectations. It was very adult. And he stepped up and he said, that will never happen again. And now she just told us last week that he asked her to just be exclusive. So,
well, there you go. I guess that's what you get for communicating well and being an adult and mature. And
I know. I will say communication is key. And I think the number one thing that goes wrong in every relationship is when we think things about other people and we want to think this is why this person did this. This is why. Sometimes we got to give them the benefit of the doubt and just communicate clearly our needs and expectations and then see what happens.
Yeah. Those assumptions can be the death of any dynamic, whether dating or long-term. Yes. And the check situation, I think, gets difficult because I think men, with the whole feminist movement and all of that, and I identify as a feminist, but I also identify with those traditional gender roles, and I appreciate that. And so I know men sometimes don't want to be offensive, and so they don't want to assume. And then women are, demonstrating our independence. And so, but I agree that, I mean, so if anyone's going to be slipping in my DMs, just know that you're paying for dinner because I am certainly not.
Absolutely. And and I think men are confused these days. Some women only want to be texted. Some women want to be called. And it is a little confusing for them. So I think, as for women, advice for women is instead of getting mad and assuming things, I think, if you like the guy at all, then communicate clearly and just see either he steps up or he doesn't. But you have to at least voice how you feel. And I think men, it never hurts for them to get clarification, to say, do you prefer to be called or text, or shall I text you? Or, I think now and it might sound not romantic anymore, but this is the day and age we live in. There's so many ways to do things. Nobody knows the right way, especially men. They just don't know what women want or expect. So clear communication is key.
Yes, I love that. All right, Gina, where can people find you on TikTok and Instagram and all those places?
Yep. So on TikTok and Instagram, it's matchmaker Gina Hendrix. And then they can always go to my website. It's ginahendrix.com. And then for coaching and my books and things like that, it's thegreatmanhunt.com, thegreatmanhunt.com, because that's the name of my most recent book. Is called The Great Manhunt. So
I love it. Okay. Well, it's been great chatting, Gina. Thank you for the tips and the insights. It's been a great time.
This has been fun. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Gina, for the insider tips. And I look forward to adding myself to your database. Thank you all for hanging out on Relatable Relationships Unfiltered. Make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, sign up for my newsletter, and find me on Instagram at Dr. Elizabeth Fedrick.